There is so much to notice in the book of Esther. The ironies, the reversals of fortune, even the bits of dark humor scattered throughout. But the very last line in the book bears noticing perhaps above all else. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Saturday, October 1st, 2022. The story in the book of Esther begins with the unlikely elevation of Esther, a Jew, to be queen of the Persian Empire. Soon afterward, Esther's uncle, Mordecai, hears of a plot to assassinate the king, and he tells Esther to warn him. When King Ahasuerus hears it, he uncovers the plot and sends the conspirators to their deaths. After that, the villain of the story, Haman, becomes the Grand Vizier, the chief administrative officer to the king. Haman proves a vain and fragile man, though, and when Esther's uncle, Mordecai, fails to bow down to him when he passes, he conspires to get his revenge on Mordecai by plotting to wipe out the entire Jewish population living within the vast Persian Empire. He determines the day on which to carry out the plot by casting lots, or pur. He then publishes his plan. When Mordecai hears it, he convinces Esther to intercede with the king on behalf of the Jews. She plans a pair of banquets on 2 consecutive days. After the first banquet, a self-satisfied Haman returns to his house, but on the way, he passes Mordecai once again, and once again Mordecai refuses to bow down to him. So he decides that in addition to wiping out the entire Jewish population, he'll hang Mordecai on an absurdly, comically large set of gallows. Meanwhile, on the night between the 2 banquets, Ahasuerus has a sleepless night and has his servants open up and read to him from the official annals of his reign. When he realizes that he had never thanked Mordecai appropriately for saving him from assassination, he decides to honor Mordecai publicly. He asks Haman how best to honor someone important. Thinking, of course, the king meant to honor him, he devised an absurdly, comically over-the-top set of honors. Thinking it a grand plan, Ahasuerus tells Haman to honor Mordecai, the very man he intended to hang in a very public way. Shortly after returning from performing this humiliating task, Haman returns to the palace for the second banquet. During the second banquet, Esther reveals to the king the plot to kill her people. When an infuriated Ahasuerus asked who plotted such a thing, she points to Haman as the culprit. The king then has Haman hanged on the gallows he had built to hang Mordecai. Ahasuerus then gives Esther Haman's house, and he gives Mordecai Haman's office. Esther and Mordecai convince Ahasuerus to reverse Haman's earlier royal decree and replace it with a decree that on the day determined by the casting of the pur, the Jews would exact revenge on all those throughout the empire who had planned to kill them. Finally, after the deed is done, Mordecai proclaims a celebration named after the pur that had been cast. Now the writer completes the story with this important postscript. King Ahasuerus laid tribute on the land and on the islands of the sea. All the acts of his power and might and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was next in rank to King Ahasuerus, and he was powerful among the Jews and popular with many of his kindred, for he sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all his descendants. It would be easy to get lost in the fact that Mordecai, as a Jew, has now become the second most important official in the entire empire. It's sort of the cherry on the top of the entire reversal of fortune Sunday. But it is the last sentence that is most important of all. He sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all his descendants. The other day I mentioned the notion of presentism. in its sense of present-day folks making moral judgments on historical figures based on modern-day moral sensibilities. But there is another sense of the term presentism, and that is the idea that people in the present tend to live without much care for those generations yet to be born. Whether it is leaving future generations with national debt or with environmental catastrophes or by depleting finite resources, forcing future generations to fashion new solutions. It is presentism. The opposite of presentism in this sense is sometimes called long-termism. That is exactly what Mordecai practiced. It is securing the salvation of the future generation, says the writer. He in effect guarantees the very existence of all future generations, generations who would never have lived had all the Jews living in the Persian Empire been exterminated. And it's not simply a byproduct of Mordecai's actions. For the writer of Esther, Mordecai actively interceded on behalf of future generations. What a concept, no? We could do worse in our generation than take a page from Mordecai, from the book of Esther, and let future generations matter to us and have an impact on the decisions we make today. When we return next week, we'll talk about Father Abraham and his unruly family. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do, this day and in all the days ahead.